Hi, welcome to The Anesthetist. Where are you listening from right now? Maybe it's at home before sleep, or just while taking a break. However you found this, I'm glad you joined. In this series, we're looking at the fourth dimension from different aspects, not only the physics side, but also how it appears in memory, anticipation, technology, communities, and even in consciousness. Each part shows another way the world is more layered than it seems. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. When dimensions become beliefs, we live in a world that feels solid, bounded, and complete. Our eyes measure distances, our hands trace shapes, and our minds build maps of rooms, streets, and cities. 3 dimensions seem to be all there is. Yet throughout history, human beings have carried an intuition that what we see is not the full story. The fourth dimension, in this sense, has always been more than a mathematical extension. It has been a symbol, a belief, a way of naming everything that lies beyond the reach of ordinary perception. When people speak of hidden layers of reality, they are not always referring to physics. The farmer in ancient Egypt, praying for the safe passage of the soul through the duat, imagined a vast space beneath and beyond the visible world. The Norse myths of Yggdrasil, the great tree binding together 9 realms, carried the same idea that the visible earth was only one layer of existence, suspended among many others. Hindu cosmology, with its multiple lokas stacked like invisible terraces of being, described a structure where consciousness could ascend or descend, depending on its state. These stories were not mathematical, but they were dimensional. They gave ordinary people a framework to live with the sense that reality is stratified, that the surface of the world is not the whole of the world. This pattern repeated across cultures. Christianity developed the concept of heaven and hell as realms beyond ordinary space, eternal places that coexisted with earthly life, but were inaccessible through physical travel. Medieval mystics described visions in which the walls of the material world dissolved, revealing radiant planes of light and sound. Sufi poets spoke of hidden gardens and veils between worlds. In each case, the fourth dimension was not defined by lines and coordinates, but by faith, imagination, and spiritual metaphor. It was a way of acknowledging that there is more to reality than our senses can provide. Even outside religion, the intuition persisted. Philosophy gave it shape in new language. Plato, in his allegory of the cave, imagined prisoners mistaking shadows for truth because they could not see the forms casting them. For him, the visible world was only a projection of a higher order of reality. What he called the realm of forms we might today call a higher dimension, an unseen space containing the real essence of things. Later thinkers echoed this. Plotinus spoke of the one as a source beyond comprehension. Kant argued that the human mind shapes experience and cannot access the thing in itself. Each of these philosophies, in its own way, gestured toward a higher space of reality just outside reach, one that structured what we could see without ever appearing directly. At the same time, art was making its own discoveries. Renaissance painters learned to use perspective, creating the illusion of depth on a flat canvas. For the first time, 2 dimensions could carry the presence of 3. To those who lived in earlier centuries, it was a revelation, a window into space where before there had only been a surface. Perspective was more than technique. It was a lesson that dimensions could be suggested, hinted at, folded into representation. Later, modern artists took the lesson further. Cubists fractured perspective altogether, trying to show multiple sides of an object at once. They were not simply breaking rules. They were asking how a canvas might represent a world richer than 3-dimensional sight allows. Science eventually gave new weight to the idea of higher dimensions. Mathematics began extending space through algebra and geometry, treating dimensions as abstract axes rather than only physical directions. By the 19th century, thinkers like Charles Hinton were already writing about the fourth dimension as a real possibility. Some saw it as a purely mathematical idea, others as a bridge to spiritual truth. The fact that both groups could use the same word shows how powerful the metaphor had become. The fourth dimension was both an equation and a mystery, both a technical possibility and a doorway to wonder. What makes all of this striking is that it reveals something about human beings. We are not satisfied with surfaces. When we see a flat shape, we imagine the volume behind it. When we live in the present, we imagine the line of time stretching backward and forward. When we look at the visible world, we imagine layers, causes, realms, and truths hidden beneath. This impulse is not a side effect of science or philosophy. It is something deeper in our nature, a constant reaching beyond what is immediately given. The fourth dimension is one of the names we have given to that reach. Think about your own life. You wake each day in a body that moves through three-dimensional space, but you also wake inside a continuity of memory and anticipation. The person you are is not only the body lying in bed, it is also the child you once were, the teenager full of questions, the adult you are still becoming. These selves are not gone. They are slices of a single being stretched across time. If you could see yourself as a four-dimensional whole, you would not appear as a point walking through moments. You would appear as a long ribbon, twisting, frayed, perhaps luminous, containing every stage of your existence at once. The fact that you can remember yesterday and imagine tomorrow is already a hint of this fourth dimensional truth. This is why we cannot easily let go of the idea of unseen dimensions. We feel them in our own experience. The way grief keeps the past alive, the way love makes the future vivid before it happens, the way imagination allows us to step into spaces we have never walked. These are not only emotions, they are dimensional experiences. They remind us that life is more than what fits inside three coordinates. And so the fourth dimension has always been both scientific and symbolic. In science, it names the extension of geometry, the axis of time, the framework of relativity. In culture, it names the unseen, the transcendent, the hidden meaning that lies just beyond. In personal life, it names the continuity we carry, the invisible threads of memory and hope that shape how we move through space. To speak of another dimension is at its core to admit that reality is larger than our perception. Every culture has had its own way of saying it, with myths of layered heavens, with philosophies of hidden truth, with art that bends perspective, with equations that extend space. Each of these is a fragment of the same intuition. There is always more than what we can see. Perhaps that is why the fourth dimension has such lasting power in the imagination. It gives form to a feeling that never leaves us, the sense that our lives, our world, our universe are incomplete if we only take them at face value. The fourth dimension is not just a direction at right angles to the ones we know. It is the possibility of more. The unseen depth behind every shadow, the continuity behind every moment, the hidden order behind every surface. And even if we cannot walk into it, we already live by it. Every memory you hold, every dream you nurture, every act of belief in something beyond appearances is a small step into that larger space. You may never draw it, or measure it, or prove it, but you feel it. You build your life within it. And that may be the truest way of all to understand what it means. Chapter 2. The continuity of the self. The three dimensions we know so well let us describe where something is, but not what it truly is. A chair in the corner of a room can be pinned by coordinates of length, width, and height. But the story of the chair, how it came to be, who sat in it, the memories carried in its fabric, never appears in those numbers. Human beings are no different. Your body occupies three-dimensional space, yet who you are is not contained in those measurements. You are stretched across something larger, a continuity that is not visible in space, but is always present in time. Consider memory. At any moment, fragments of the past surface, the first day of school, the smell of a particular room, the voice of someone you loved. These are not material objects, yet they live with you. They shape how you act, what you choose, how you respond. They are part of your being in this moment, even though they belong to a world that is gone. In this way, memory acts like a window into a fourth dimension. It lets the past touch the present, folding time into experience. Without it, you would be only a point, isolated in the now. With it, you are an extended line, a ribbon with depth that no mirror can reflect. Now think of anticipation. Every plan you make, every hope or fear you carry, is a projection forward. You imagine the outcome of tomorrow's conversation, the shape of a future home, the sound of laughter you expect to hear. In imagination, the future already exists. It is not physical, but it exerts weight. You feel the pull of it in the choices you make. This anticipation is another way the fourth dimension enters daily life. It stretches you forward, making you more than a creature of the present. You become a being who exists across possibilities, navigating not just space but also an invisible line of time. Together, memory and anticipation create a sense of self that is layered, extended, multidimensional. The child you once were lives inside the adult you have become, and the adult you are becoming lives inside your thoughts, even before you arrive there. In 3 dimensions, you seem singular, one body, one face, one presence in space. But across time, you are multiple selves threaded together, each stage of your life coexisting along an unseen axis. If you could step back and view yourself from a fourth dimensional vantage, you would not appear as a single figure moving through moments. You would appear as an elongated being, stretched from birth to death, containing every version of yourself at once. This continuity is not just abstract. You feel it each time you sense that you are the same person you were years ago. Even though your body has changed, your thoughts have shifted, and your memories have blurred. Something ties it all together, something that cannot be explained by 3 dimensions alone. It is as if an invisible thread runs through every stage, linking the child to the adult, the present to the future, the remembered to the anticipated. That thread is your 4-dimensional identity. Philosophers have often touched on this without naming it as such. The idea of the self has always been more than a material body. Locke spoke of personal identity as continuity of consciousness. Husserl described inner time consciousness as the way we experience moments flowing into one another. These accounts point to the same truth, that human life is not experienced as a series of isolated instants, but as a connected whole. To live is to occupy not only space, but also duration. You do not just exist where you are, you exist when you are. This becomes even clearer when you think about emotion. Grief is not simply sadness in the present. It is the weight of a past moment pressing into now. Love is not only a feeling in this second, it is the accumulation of shared time, memories layered one upon another, anticipation of more to come. Hope is not just a mood. It is the shape of a possible future, reaching backward into the choices you make today. Every powerful human feeling is dimensional. It pulls from behind. It pushes from ahead. It envelops you in a continuity that cannot be seen, but is always lived. Art often captures this more vividly than analysis. A piece of music unfolds in time, carrying you from one moment to the next, reminding you that its beauty lies not in a single note, but in the line that threads them together. A film or a novel works the same way. It is not a collection of still frames or pages, but a journey that only makes sense when past, present, and future flow into one another. In this sense, art is 4-dimensional. It mirrors the structure of human life, showing us that meaning comes not from isolated points, but from the thread that connects them. And so the continuity of the self is perhaps the clearest evidence that we already live in 4 dimensions, even if we do not name it that way. We are not trapped in the present moment as a mathematical point. We are lines and ribbons of existence, extended, braided, constantly folding memory and anticipation into the now. To speak of the 4th dimension is not just to imagine cubes within cubes or abstract geometries. It is to recognize the way our very sense of self is structured, as beings who are never only here, but always also then. In this way, the fourth dimension is not distant or alien. It is intimate. It is the shape of your life as it really is, continuous, layered, unseeable from within, but undeniable in experience. When you think of who you are already thinking in four dimensions. You are remembering, anticipating, and living across time all at once. That continuity is what makes you human, and it is why the idea of higher dimensions has always felt less like a foreign theory and more like a reflection of something we already know inside ourselves. Chapter 3: Shadows of the Invisible. When light strikes a three-dimensional object, it casts a shadow on a two-dimensional surface. The shadow is not the object itself. It is a flattened trace, a distorted outline that hints at depth without revealing it. For creatures living only in two dimensions, such a shadow would be mysterious, a shifting shape that never quite discloses the thing that caused it. Our lives, too, may be like shadows. We exist in three dimensions, but perhaps what we see, what we touch, and what we measure are only the outlines of a deeper form extending into another dimension we cannot perceive. Think about how often you experience this in small ways. A memory surfaces, sudden and vivid, pulling you back to a moment that is no longer physically here. The sound of laughter from years ago fills your mind as if it had just happened. A scent carries you across decades in an instant. These are shadows of a larger continuity. They are fragments of a hidden structure that your senses cannot grasp, but your mind can still touch. If you could see your entire life at once, every memory and every future possibility would be part of the same form. What you experience moment by moment are the shadows cast from that greater whole. Art has long played with this idea. A drawing on paper is a two-dimensional image, yet it suggests depth. A painter uses perspective, shading, and proportion to let your eyes believe that you are looking into space rather than at a flat surface. Cubist paintings go further, trying to show multiple perspectives at once, as though the object were unfolding into another dimension and spilling across the canvas. These works remind us that what we perceive may be only partial, that the real object may extend beyond what our senses deliver. Philosophy has echoed the same theme. Plato's allegory of the cave imagines people chained so that they can see only the shadows of objects cast by firelight. To them, the shadows are reality. The idea that there is a higher form, a greater truth, remains outside their perception. In many ways, we may still be like those prisoners. The three-dimensional world we know may itself be a cave wall, and the true forms of things may lie in a fourth dimension, their shadows flickering into our space in ways we misinterpret as complete. Science, too, hints at this. A rotating cube can cast many different two-dimensional shadows depending on its angle. A tesseract, or a bosseract, a four-dimensional cube would cast shifting three-dimensional shadows as it moved. To us, such a projection might appear as a solid object that morphs, expands, or even disappears. Reports of strange lights, apparitions, or objects that seem to break the rules of space may be explained in part by this idea of projection. Glimpses of something real but not fully present in three dimensions. Whether or not these accounts prove anything, the thought itself reveals how limited our perception may be. Even everyday technology relies on projection. Blueprints are two-dimensional shadows of three-dimensional buildings. Computer screens are flat planes representing complex spaces. A medical scan compresses the body into images, slices of a deeper structure. We accept these shadows as useful, even though we know they leave things out. Perhaps our entire perception of reality is such a projection, a useful but incomplete image of a deeper dimensional form. The important question is not whether we can ever see the fourth dimension directly, but how we live, knowing that what we see may only be shadows. Do we mistake appearances for completeness? Do we recognize the possibility that reality is more than what shows itself to us? If we hold on to the idea of the fourth dimension as metaphor, then every experience becomes layered. A song is not just sound, but the echo of time flowing. A memory is not just the past, but a thread connecting one moment to the next. An encounter with another person is not just their present form, but the entire shadow of their past and their unfolding future. The fourth dimension, then, is less about a physical direction and more about a habit of perception. It invites us to look at the world with humility, to remember that every object, every person, every moment may be more than its visible surface. What we see may be only a shadow, cast from a greater form hidden in dimensions we cannot yet enter. Chapter 4. Time woven into being. We often think of dimensions as extensions of space, length, width, height. They define where things are and how they relate to one another. But there is another dimension that we experience more deeply than any other, and it is not measured with a ruler. Time flows through every thought, every action, every memory. It is the axis we live inside constantly, even if we cannot see it directly. To understand the fourth dimension, we cannot avoid time. It is not an addition to the three dimensions we know. It is the fabric in which our entire existence is embedded. Time is not merely a ticking of clocks. It is not simply a count of seconds and minutes. It is the texture of experience. Imagine waking up one morning with no memory of the day before. You would know the space around you, the walls, the bed, the light through the window. But without the thread of memory, you would not know yourself. The sense of continuity, of being the same person as yesterday, is not carried in space. It is carried in time. Memory weaves the fourth dimension into your life, binding you to a longer story. Think about the way a song unfolds. One note by itself is nothing. It vanishes almost as soon as it is born. But string notes together, and they become melody. That melody depends on time. You cannot grasp it all at once. You hold the beginning in memory while anticipating what comes next. And in that movement, beauty appears. In the same way, your life is not just the present moment. It is a melody stretched across years. Each instant by itself may be fleeting, but together they form something whole. Without the fourth dimension, there would be no music, no story, no identity. The past clings to us through memory. The smell of food brings back a childhood kitchen. A street corner reminds you of a conversation that changed your life. A piece of clothing carries the presence of someone you once loved. These fragments are not illusions. They are the shadows of your four-dimensional being. They show that who you are now is inseparable from who you have been. Even if your body has changed, even if your surroundings are different, those earlier slices of you still live on in memory, woven into the present. And just as memory stretches you backward, anticipation stretches you forward. You prepare for tomorrow's meeting. You imagine next year's travels. You dream of who you might become. These futures have not happened yet, but they press on your present choices. You study, you save money, you move across the world for opportunities that do not yet exist. The fourth dimension is not simply the weight of the past. It is also the pull of the future. You are extended in both directions. At every moment, you are more than where you are. You are also when you are. This continuity transforms how we think about identity. In three dimensions, you appear as a single body at a single place. But in four dimensions, you are not a body. You are a line, a ribbon, a continuous shape stretching from birth to death. Every age, every stage, every version of you belongs to the same whole. What you see in the mirror is only one slice of that larger being. The child you were and the elder you will become are all part of the same dimensional shape. You only experience one thin cross-section, but the four-dimensional whole is always there. Physics has formalized this perspective. In the framework of space-time, each object traces a world lined a path through the union of space and time. Your life is one such line, already written across the fabric of the universe. From this view, the past and the future are not gone or yet to come. They exist, fixed, just as surely as the present. You experience them in sequence, but in the larger structure they coexist. This idea is unsettling to some, comforting to others. It suggests that nothing is ever entirely lost, that every moment of your life remains part of the whole. But it also raises the possibility that the future is not as open as we believe, that the path is already laid out. Philosophers have struggled with this question. If time is a dimension like space, then the flow of time may be an illusion. The past, present, and future would simply be coordinates, all equally real. What we call now would only be the slice of the world line that our consciousness currently occupies. From this perspective, you are like someone walking through a vast library, experiencing one page at a time, while the entire book already exists on the shelf. This is known as the block universe view, and it suggests that change is not the creation of something new, but the unfolding of what is already written. Whether or not this is true, our experience tells us something undeniable. We live dimensionally. Every decision is shaped by memory and guided by anticipation. Every relationship is a thread of shared time, strengthened with each moment spent together. Every achievement is not an isolated point, but the accumulation of effort across months and years. The meaning of life comes not from space, but from time, from the way moments are connected into patterns. Emotion makes this clear, in ways theory cannot. Grief is the presence of the past in the present. Love is the presence of the future in the now. Hope and fear are ways the fourth dimension reaches into us, pulling us forward or weighing us down. Without time, emotions would collapse into sensations, flat and momentary. With time, they become layers of experience, each one built upon those before it, each one opening into what may come after. Art reflects this structure too. A film is made of still images, but when shown in sequence, it becomes alive. A novel is ink on paper, but when read over days, it builds a world that exists only through time. A piece of music cannot be reduced to a chord. It is always the journey across notes, silence, and rhythm. Art teaches us that meaning is not in the point, but in the line, not in the instant, but in the duration. And that is what it means to live in the fourth dimension. The mystery of time is that it both limits and liberates us. It limits us because we cannot step outside it. We cannot move backward into the past or leap forward into the future. We move in one direction, at one pace, carried along by the arrow of entropy. Yet it also liberates us because it gives us story, growth, and possibility. Without time, nothing would change. With time, everything transforms. Children grow, friendships deepen, wounds heal, ideas spread, and beauty emerges. The fourth dimension is both the cage and the stage of our lives. To see yourself as four-dimensional is to recognize that you are more than a passing moment. You are a continuum. You are not only the point of now, but the line that stretches across decades, the melody that can only be heard when time is allowed to unfold. And whether time is an illusion or a dimension as real as space, the truth remains that it is inseparable from who you are. You cannot exist without it. It is not outside you. It is the shape of your being itself. In this way, the fourth dimension is not distant, not abstract, not reserved for physics. It is the most intimate dimension of all. It is the thread of your identity, the rhythm of your days, the silent axis upon which every joy and sorrow turns. To live is to move through it, to be stretched by it, to be defined by it. The fourth dimension is time, and time is you. Is Chapter 5, The Architecture of Memory. Close your eyes and try to recall the place where you grew up. Perhaps a hallway with familiar creaking floorboards. Perhaps a window that framed the sky in a way you thought was ordinary until you left. Notice how the image appears. It is not only space that you see, but time folded into it. You are not just picturing walls and doors. You are feeling what it was like to inhabit them years ago. This is the architecture of memory, a hidden dimension built inside your mind, stretching your three-dimensional world across the axis of time. Memory is often thought of as storage, like a box filled with photographs. But it is not passive, it is alive, reconstructing, reshaping, linking fragments together. Each time you remember, you are not pulling out a static picture. You are reliving, rethreading the line of your four-dimensional self. The scent of bread can resurrect entire kitchens. The texture of a song can pull you into a forgotten afternoon. The feel of a certain air can summon emotions without words. These are not accidents. They are ways the brain folds time into present space, giving depth beyond what the senses report. Scientists have tried to trace where memories live in the brain. They map networks, firing neurons, hippocampal circuits. But even when they describe the mechanism, the mystery remains. What you experience is not electrical activity. It is the sudden re-entry into another moment. You step back into a classroom, or a park, or a conversation, as though the past is not gone but layered within you. In that layering lies a kind of dimensional richness. You are never just here, you are also there, in countless places that still live in you. Consider how memory defines identity. Without it, you would wake each day as someone new, disconnected, floating without roots. With it, you are continuous. You are able to say, I am the same person I was yesterday. Even though every cell in your body has been shifting, even though your circumstances have changed, memory stitches the line. It is the architect of the self across time, the silent craftsman of the fourth dimension you inhabit. But memory is not perfect. It is partial, selective, fragile. Sometimes it distorts, sometimes it fades, sometimes it rearranges itself. From one perspective, this seems like a flaw. From another, it shows that memory is not just a record, but a construction. It builds a version of the past that makes sense for the present. In doing so, it bends the shape of your four-dimensional being. The shadow of who you were is never entirely stable. It shifts depending on who you are now. You might remember a childhood event differently each time, because your present self recast the past. In this way, memory shows us that the fourth dimension is not fixed, but fluid, more like a living fabric than a rigid structure. This fluidity has profound consequences. It means the past is not simply behind you, sealed and untouchable. It is active. It influences. It changes. It enters into dialogue with the present. A painful memory can shape the way you step into new relationships. A joyful memory can sustain you during struggle. Even events you barely recall can leave traces in habits, in patterns, in unconscious choices. The architecture of memory is not a museum. It is a city in which you continue to live, its streets winding into every decision. Art reflects this truth constantly. A novel may move back and forth in time, showing how characters are shaped by echoes of earlier moments. The film may intercut the present with flashes of memory, making it clear that the meaning of an event only emerges when seen against the backdrop of what came before. Music, too, with its themes and reprises, carries memory within its form. A motif introduced early returns later with new weight, transformed by the passage of time. These patterns remind us that human life is not linear. It is recursive, layered, resonant. Memory ensures that the present is always more than itself. There is also a social dimension to this. Communities remember collectively through rituals, monuments, and shared stories. Just as an individual is extended across time by memory, so too are cultures. A nation without memory becomes unmourned. A family without memory loses its sense of connection. These collective architectures build a higher dimension of belonging, one that binds people across generations. They shape identities that extend beyond the individual, threading multiple lives into a single fabric. In the end, memory is both fragile and immense. A single injury can erase decades, leaving someone disoriented. Yet a single fragment can sustain a lifetime, like the memory of a face or a voice that never fades. The architecture of memory is not symmetrical or reliable, but it is what makes us dimensional beings. It allows us to inhabit more than one moment at a time. It lets us be present not only where we are, but also when we have been. To live with memory is to live with layers. Every step you take is accompanied by countless echoes, some sharp, some faint, some reshaped by years of retelling. The fourth dimension is not an abstract concept in this sense. It is the lived reality of remembering. You are not only a body moving through space, you are a structure of memory, a shape stretched across time, an edifice built of moments that continue to stand even when the physical spaces are gone. This is why memory feels sacred. It is the bridge to everything you have been, the vessel of every joy and pain, the silent evidence that you are more than a point in the present. It shows that the fourth dimension is not distant or speculative. It is within you, carved into the folds of your mind, shaping who you are with every recall. To reflect on memory is to realize that you are already living in more dimensions than you can see. Chapter 6: Anticipation and the Shape of Futures. Human life is not confined to the present moment. At every instant, your mind reaches beyond what is here, constructing visions of what might come. This act of anticipation is as natural as breathing. It shapes your days, your choices, and your sense of self. In many ways, anticipation is the mirror of memory. Where memory binds you to what has been, anticipation extends you into what could be. Together they weave the fabric of your existence across the fourth dimension of time. Think of the small rituals that fill an ordinary day. You set an alarm so that you will not oversleep. You place food in the refrigerator because you know you will be hungry tomorrow. You keep an umbrella by the door because you have seen the weather forecast. None of these actions serve the present. They are offerings to the future, preparations for a moment not yet lived. In them lies proof that you are a dimensional being, stretched across time. You are never only here, you are always also leaning toward what is ahead. This leaning shapes the rhythm of your life. A child studies not for the joy of a textbook page, but for the adult they hope to become. A musician practices scales with the sound of a future performance in mind. A family plants seeds in spring, knowing the harvest will not come for months. In each case, the present is organized around a future image. Without anticipation, there would be no reason to act, no meaning in preparation, no continuity in life. Anticipation, though, is not limited to practical plans. It is also imagination unfolding. When you hesitate before speaking, you play through possible responses in your mind. When you choose a path, you picture the outcomes of each option. The mind is constantly generating futures, branching possibilities that stretch out like an invisible tree. Each branch represents a potential world line, a version of you who might come into being. You stand at the root, glimpsing the branches without knowing which will bear fruit. This tree of futures is vast but fragile. Some branches vanish the instant you choose otherwise. Others remain latent, waiting for the right conditions. To anticipate is to walk among these possibilities, shifting between them in thought, weighing which ones might become real. It is a remarkable capacity. Unlike space, where you can only occupy one place at a time, in imagination you can inhabit countless futures at once. You can live briefly in them, sense their weight, and let them shape the present. Hope and fear are born from this dimension. Hope gives you courage, drawing energy from a future that has not yet arrived. Fear drains you, pressing you with images of outcomes that may never happen. Both are real in effect, even though their objects remain unrealized. The student awaiting results, the traveler unsure of the next step, the patient waiting for a diagnosis, all live inside futures that do not yet exist in space, but that occupy the mind with overwhelming force. In anticipation, the fourth dimension is felt directly, not as abstract geometry, but as emotional gravity. Cultures have long organized themselves around collective anticipation. Religions imagine ultimate futures, heavens, rebirths, promised lands. Political visions project what societies could become if certain paths are chosen. Economies depend on speculation, entire markets moving on predictions of what will happen next year. Art, too, is built on anticipation. The suspense of a story, the tension in a symphony, the rising action in a film, all invite you to wait, to lean forward, to be suspended between now and what comes next. Anticipation is not just an inner experience, it is a shared architecture of meaning. Yet anticipation also reveals the limits of our perception. We project confidently, but reality rarely unfolds exactly as imagined. An encounter, a decision, an accident can change the course of everything. Futures dissolve, others emerge. To anticipate is to live with uncertainty. In physics, the fourth dimension may appear as a fixed structure, a world line already drawn. In lived experience, it is a shifting horizon, a play of possibilities constantly opening and closing. We are both passengers on a determined path and explorers in a forest of branching outcomes. The paradox is what makes anticipation both exhilarating and exhausting. Still, whether the future is fixed or fluid, anticipation is evidence that we are not creatures of the present alone. Our thoughts are always extended forward, shaping actions now for outcomes unseen. Every savings account, every blueprint, every promise is an inscription in the fourth dimension. They are attempts to secure a future that does not yet exist, to tie the present to something beyond it. To anticipate is to stretch yourself into time, to inhabit the not yet. It is the act of living in possibility, carrying with you shadows of futures that may never come, and fragments of ones that surely will. In this way, anticipation is not a distraction from reality, but a core part of it. It reveals that you are more than a body in space. You are a being spread across dimensions, woven not only into where you are, but into where you are going. The fourth dimension is not only memory behind you, but also horizon before you. Each day you walk toward it, guided by visions of what might be, shaped by hopes and fears that exist only in imagination, yet define your reality as much as any solid wall. To understand anticipation is to understand that the fourth dimension is already within you, pulling you forward, writing your story, moment by moment. Chapter 7. Dreams as dimensional gateways. Each night, when the body grows heavy and the mind drifts, we slip into spaces that feel both familiar and impossible. In dreams, streets fold back upon themselves. People change faces, time collapses or stretches. A room can open into a landscape. A moment can last an eternity. None of this obeys the rigid structure of three-dimensional space and linear time. Yet within the dream it feels complete. This is why dreams have often been seen as glimpses of another dimension, places where consciousness briefly steps outside the ordinary frame of perception. Consider how fluid time becomes in sleep. Hours of dreaming can feel like minutes, or a short nap can hold a narrative stretching across years. This elasticity is not just a trick of memory. It shows that the mind does not experience time as a fixed current. It can accelerate, decelerate, even suspend it. In the waking world, clocks insist on regularity. In the dream world, your inner clock follows no such rule. This plasticity is deeply dimensional. It suggests that time, as we experience it, may be a projection shaped by the brain rather than an unchanging flow. Space in dreams is just as unstable. You might walk through a door and find yourself in a place from childhood. You may step into one room only to discover a city, or find that a hallway stretches endlessly, bending into geometries that make no sense. These spaces are impossible in three-dimensional logic, yet they unfold naturally in dreams. They carry the feeling of higher dimensional projection, as if your mind is briefly free to rearrange the coordinates of space. Dreams also blend memory and anticipation. Fragments of your past resurface, recombined with fears or hopes about the future. A conversation you had years ago may reappear, but in a setting you have never visited. The mind weaves time like a fabric, stitching together moments that never coexisted in waking life. In this way, dreams mirror the structure of the fourth dimension. They show how past, present, and future may all be slices of the same larger whole, experienced together rather than in sequence. Cultures throughout history have treated dreams as windows into the unseen. Ancient peoples saw them as messages from gods or ancestors. Shamans entered dream states as a way to travel between worlds. Philosophers have wondered if waking life itself is another dream, less flexible, but no less illusory. In each case, dreams are not dismissed as random. They are taken as evidence that consciousness is not bound by the limits of waking perception. They suggest that the mind already carries within it the ability to navigate other dimensions. Modern science studies dreams with different tools. It maps the cycles of REM sleep, tracks electrical patterns, analyzes recurring themes. Yet even with brain scans and data, the essence of dreams remains mysterious. Why do they feel so immersive? Why do they bend time and space so naturally? One possibility is that the brain, freed from external input, begins to explore the architecture of its own networks, which are not bound to three-dimensional geometry. Neural activity creates landscapes of thought that do not need to obey physical laws. From the inside, these landscapes feel real. They are lived as dimensional environments. Dreams also reveal how consciousness itself might be multidimensional. In waking life, we filter experience through rules, gravity, consistency, linear time. In dreams, those rules are loosened. Consciousness reveals that it can operate without them, building worlds that are unstable yet coherent in their own logic. This flexibility may be a hint of how the mind could perceive higher dimensions if freed from its evolutionary constraints. It is not proof, but it is a demonstration. Perception is not fixed. It can bend, stretch, and fold. For the dreamer, what matters is not the scientific explanation, but the experience itself. To wake from a dream is to feel you have traveled, lived, witnessed. The emotions remain long after the images fade. You wake shaken by grief for a loss that never happened, or glowing with joy from an encounter that was only imagined. These residues are real. They shape mood, memory, and sometimes even decision. In this sense, dreams spill into waking life, as though the dimension you visited in sleep leaves shadows in the day. Perhaps the most striking feature of dreams is how they collapse boundaries. They blur the line between inner and outer, self and other, past and future. In them, you are both the observer and the world observed. You create landscapes and then walk inside them without ever noticing the paradox. This unity points to a truth often hidden in waking life. The separation of self and world may itself be an artifact of three-dimensional consciousness. In dreams, it dissolves, revealing a continuity more like a higher dimensional space where divisions are fluid. Dreams are not escape, they are evidence. They show that the mind is capable of inhabiting realities that are not constrained by physical laws. Whether those realities exist independently or are generated by the brain is an open question. But in either case, the experience demonstrates that our consciousness is not confined to three dimensions. It can imagine, build, and live in structures that exceed them. Dreams, then, are not illusions to dismiss. They are nightly reminders that we are already dimensional beings, reaching beyond the visible into spaces we cannot yet name. Chapter 8. Synesthesia and Altered Perception. Perception seems simple at first. Light strikes the eyes, sound vibrates the ears, touch ripples across the skin, and the brain assembles the data into a seamless picture of reality. We move through this picture as though it were complete, confident that what we perceive is the whole of the world. Yet sometimes the boundaries blur. Colors are heard, sounds are seen, time is felt as texture or taste. These unusual crossings are called synesthesia, and they reveal that perception is not fixed. It can be rearranged, expanded, and even blended in ways that suggest dimensions of experience beyond the ordinary three. Synesthesia is not rare. Some people taste particular flavors when they hear musical notes. Others see letters and numbers in vivid colors, even when those symbols are printed in plain black ink. There are those who can feel shapes when listening to voices or sense the passing of months as a circular map stretching around their bodies. These experiences are consistent, repeated across a lifetime. They are not metaphorical, not imagination, but genuine perception. For a synesthete, the world is literally richer in dimensions than for most of us. What makes this so fascinating is that the senses themselves are not separate channels, but threads in a single network. The brain constantly integrates them, binding sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell into a coherent whole. Synesthesia shows us what happens when those boundaries loosen, when signals flow across unusual pathways. Instead of remaining neatly divided, they overlap, producing perceptions that cannot exist in ordinary three-dimensional experience. A note on a piano is not just sound, it is also blue. A word on a page is not just meaning, it is also a flash of color or shape. The result is a life lived with extra axes of sensation. Think about what this implies. Most of us believe our senses tell us all there is to know. Yet synesthesia demonstrates that the brain can generate perceptions that are no less real to the experiencer, but invisible to others. If a letter can be both shape and color, if a sound can be both tone and texture, then perhaps our ordinary senses are only one way of mapping reality. The brain may be capable of perceiving far more dimensions of experience than we usually allow. The fact that synesthesia feels natural to those who live with it suggests that our three-dimensional picture of the world is not complete. It is one version among many possible arrangements. Altered states of consciousness extend this lesson further. Under the influence of psychedelics, meditation, or even sensory deprivation, many people report shifts in perception that feel as though they are entering another dimension. Colors intensify, patterns repeat infinitely, boundaries between objects dissolve. Time slows down or speeds up, sometimes disappearing altogether. The sense of self blurs, expanding outward until it feels connected with everything. These are not small distortions. They are profound reorganizations of perception, moments when the usual three-dimensional frame falls away. Modern neuroscience can describe some of this. Psychedelics, for instance, reduce activity in brain regions that filter and constrain sensory input. With those filters weakened, signals flood across networks, producing new associations and unusual connections. Meditation can quiet the default mode network, altering the brain's sense of self and time. Even ordinary stress can change perception, making minutes stretch into hours or compress into seconds. In every case, the message is the same. Perception is not rigid. It is flexible, shaped by both biology and context. But the experience itself feels larger than explanation. To those who enter these altered states, it can seem as if they have touched something beyond ordinary reality. A person may describe colors they have never seen before, shapes that defy geometry, or a sense of being in a space outside of time. Some speak of visions of infinite grids or endlessly unfolding patterns. Others describe the unity of opposites, the simultaneous presence of inside and outside, self and world. These are experiences that resist description in three-dimensional language. They feel like shadows cast from higher dimensional forms, glimpsed briefly through the cracks in perception. It is important to recognize that these experiences are not merely hallucinations in the trivial sense. They are real perceptions, constructed by the brain in the same way as ordinary sight and sound. The difference is that they do not conform to the stable, shared world that most people agree upon. Yet they reveal something profound about the machinery of consciousness. If the brain can create experiences of other dimensions so vividly, perhaps it is not because those dimensions are inventions, but because the brain itself is wired to perceive more than we usually allow. Synesthesia and altered states may be reminders that our ordinary view of the world is filtered, not final. Art has often tried to capture this. The painter Wassily Kandinsky claimed he could hear colors and see sounds, and his abstract works attempted to show that union. Musicians speak of tones as colors, building compositions around synesthetic associations. Poets use metaphors of blending senses, describing sounds as bright or colors as loud, trying to express the richness of perception that defies separation. These efforts show a human hunger to break the boundaries of ordinary senses, to approach a vision of reality that is more dimensional, more complete. Philosophy, too, has touched on this. Phenomenologists argue that perception is not passive reception, but active construction. We do not simply see the world, we build it through our embodied experience. If that is true, then altered perception is not a breakdown, but a revelation. It shows that there are many ways to construct reality, many ways to live in dimensions that overlap and intertwine. What we take as the real world may be only one version among many possible mappings. There is also an ethical and social dimension to this. People who experience the world differently, whether through synesthesia, neurodiversity, or altered states, remind us that perception is not uniform. Their realities are no less valid. They expand the collective understanding of what it means to be human. When a synesthete describes a sound as purple, it challenges the rest of us to reconsider the limits of our own senses. When a meditator describes timelessness, it pushes us to ask whether time itself is as rigid as we assume. These voices expand our conception of reality, inviting us to imagine dimensions we may not otherwise believe in. The implications reach further. If the brain can generate higher dimensional experiences internally, perhaps it is already tuned to dimensions beyond space and time, glimpsed only rarely. Evolution shaped our senses for survival, not for truth. We see enough to avoid predators, hear enough to communicate, remember enough to learn. But survival does not require perceiving all dimensions of reality. What lies beyond may still be there, faintly accessible through unusual wiring, altered states, or deep practice. In this way, synesthesia and altered perception may be evolutionary byproducts, cracks in the system that reveal the larger architecture hidden behind. To live with this understanding is to live with humility. We must admit that what we call reality is filtered, partial, constructed. The fact that some people hear colors or taste words shows that the boundaries we take for granted are not absolute. The fact that altered states can dissolve time and space shows that our perception of dimensions is not fixed. And the fact that these experiences feel meaningful, often life-changing, suggests that they reveal something essential, not accidental. Perhaps the fourth dimension is not only out there in physics, but also in here, in consciousness itself. It is not only the time we measure with clocks, but the expansion of perception into forms that do not fit neatly into three axes: to see sound, to taste time, to dissolve into infinite patterns. These are not delusions. They are reminders that we are already more dimensional than we realize. When perception blurs and senses overlap, the world becomes richer, stranger, and more profound. Synesthesia and altered states remind us that reality is not limited to what we ordinarily see. They hint that hidden dimensions are always close, not in distant galaxies, but in the architecture of our own minds. To explore them is to recognize that human life is not three-dimensional. It is layered, interwoven, and open to possibilities we are only beginning to glimpse. Chapter 9. Tools that extend our perception. Human senses evolved for survival, not for completeness. Eyes adapted to daylight and motion, ears to the range of voices and rustling threats, touch to immediate surfaces. These limits served well enough for hunting, gathering, and building shelter, but they were never designed to reveal the fullness of reality. The universe is vast, containing wavelengths too long or too short for our eyes, vibrations too low or too high for our ears, and structures too small or too large for direct grasp. To reach beyond these boundaries, we have always built tools. Each invention is an extension of perception, a way of stretching human awareness into dimensions otherwise invisible. The telescope was among the first of these expansions. When Galileo raised it to the night sky, he saw mountains on the moon, the phases of Venus and the moons of Jupiter. These worlds had been present all along, yet invisible to unaided eyes. The telescope extended vision, revealing that Earth was not the center of everything but one planet among many. It was more than a tool. It was a crack in the wall of perception, a reminder that what we see directly is only a fraction of reality. Every larger lens since has opened another window, until today we observe galaxies billions of light years away. Their light carrying messages from a time before our species existed. Through telescopes, we look not only farther into space, but also deeper into time. The microscope performed a similar revolution in the other direction. To the naked eye, water is clear, smooth, empty of form. Under a microscope, it teems with life. Cells dividing, organisms swimming, structures more intricate than imagination. Diseases once thought to be curses revealed themselves as microbes. Human bodies became ecosystems, built from trillions of unseen parts. What had been invisible turned into the fabric of truth. The microscope was not only a device, but a dimensional bridge. It allowed us to see that scale itself is a kind of hidden dimension, one that shapes reality without our awareness. Other instruments followed, each peeling back a layer. X-ray machines showed bones through flesh. Radio receivers captured voices across oceans. Infrared cameras revealed heat invisible to sight. Ultraviolet cameras revealed patterns guiding insects. Particle accelerators detected subatomic collisions, where matter itself dissolves into probabilities. Each device was like adding a new sense, one not given by evolution but constructed by thought and craft. They extended our perception into new domains, showing that dimensions are not only physical directions but also ranges of experience. Virtual reality offers a more recent example. With headsets and sensors, humans can now step into simulated worlds, spaces that never existed physically but feel as real as any room. VR creates an illusion of dimensionality by tricking the senses, convincing the brain that what it sees and hears surrounds it in depth. This is not merely entertainment. It is a demonstration that perception can be shaped by input alone, that the world we experience is as much a construction of the brain as it is of external reality. Virtual environments are reminders that higher dimensions may be closer than we think, not because they exist elsewhere, but because the mind is capable of building them. Even mathematics and data visualization are tools of perception. A graph takes millions of numbers and turns them into a shape that the eye can comprehend. Complex data sets are often represented as maps in 2 or 3 dimensions, even though they exist in spaces with hundreds of variables. These projections allow us to navigate realities that no single sense could grasp directly. In this way, mathematics becomes not just an abstract discipline, but a sensory extension, a language that translates dimensions into forms the human mind can hold. Technology is moving toward even deeper extensions. Brain-computer interfaces promise to bypass senses altogether, feeding information directly into neural circuits. Imagine seeing infrared without a camera, or feeling magnetic fields without a compass. Already, some experiments have given people new sensory channels, vibrating belts that signal direction, implants that let the blind perceive outlines of shapes, devices that allow the deaf to feel sound as vibration across the skin. Each of these inventions stretches perception, expanding the dimensional space in which humans can live. What all these tools reveal is that reality is layered, and our natural senses capture only a narrow band. The telescope, microscope, radio, camera, and computer are not merely instruments. They are prosthetics of perception, extensions of the human body into the hidden dimensions of existence. They show us galaxies and molecules, invisible rays and abstract networks. They confirm that the 3 dimensions of space, plus the felt flow of time, are only the surface of a deeper fabric. To live with these extensions is to admit that our natural view is incomplete. What you see with your eyes is not reality itself, but a slice, What you hear is not the full soundscape, but a band tuned to survival. Every sense is a filter, leaving out more than it reveals. But with tools, we peel back the filters. We discover that the universe is stranger, richer, and more dimensional than our ancestors ever suspected. These extensions also raise questions. If our tools can reveal so much that was hidden, how much still lies beyond even their reach? If every instrument opens a new dimension, are there infinitely many waiting? Perhaps higher dimensions are not only geometric directions, but ways of seeing, layers of perception, still unavailable to us. In that case, the fourth dimension is not just time, it is also potential. The capacity to perceive what has always been present, but unseen. Technology is often judged by its usefulness, but at a deeper level, its significance lies in how it changes what it means to be human. To extend perception is to extend identity. With each tool, we become beings who see farther, deeper, and wider. We become inhabitants of spaces our ancestors could not imagine. These expansions are not trivial. They are steps into hidden dimensions, glimpses of a reality that refuses to be contained by the limits of unaided senses. Through every lens, every sensor, every simulation, the lesson is the same. The world is larger than perception, and perception can grow. The fourth dimension is not only something to be found in the cosmos, it is something we construct with our tools. Each invention a doorway into the unseen. We are creatures who cannot remain confined to what evolution gave us. We reach in, we build, we extend. And in doing so, we discover that reality is always more dimensional than we believe. Chapter 10. Virtual worlds and the simulation of dimensions. Step into a headset, and suddenly the room disappears. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, everything dissolves, replaced by a landscape that was never there. Perhaps you are standing on the edge of a cliff above an ocean. Perhaps you are walking through the ruins of an ancient city. Perhaps you are drifting weightless in orbit, looking down on Earth itself. Your body has not moved. You are still in the same space, yet your senses insist otherwise. This is the power of virtual reality to rewrite perception so completely that you inhabit a world built from signals alone. Virtual reality is not the only simulation of dimensions, but it is among the most convincing. With light projected into your eyes and sound fed into your ears, the brain constructs a reality that feels solid. Motion sensors track your movements, adjusting the illusion so that every turn of the head, every step forward, matches the new environment. The effect is not simply a trick, it is a demonstration of how easily the brain can accept new dimensions. If the input is coherent, perception will follow. This principle is not new. A painting on a flat canvas can create the illusion of depth. Perspective lines trick the eye into believing space extends behind the surface. A film strings together still images, and the mind interprets them as motion. Even a novel with words printed on a page can generate entire worlds in the imagination. What virtual reality does differently is immerse all the senses at once, surrounding the participant with a reality that leaves little room for doubt. It is not only art seen, it is art entered. The implication is profound. If our experience of space can be generated artificially, then perception itself is flexible. The brain is not concerned with whether the world is real or virtual. It is concerned with coherence. As long as the signals fit together, the mind inhabits them. This means that dimensions are not fixed properties of the world, but ways of organizing perception. When you walk through a virtual environment, you are living in dimensions constructed not by nature, but by code. These environments can go beyond imitation. In virtual reality, rules need not match physics. You can walk on ceilings, fold space so that doors lead to impossible geometries, or stretch time so that minutes last hours. The brain accepts these distortions if they are presented consistently. This suggests that higher dimensional experiences are not entirely beyond reach. Even if we cannot enter them physically, we can simulate them in perception. Virtual worlds become laboratories for dimensions, places where the imagination and technology collaborate to expand what it feels like to exist. Consider a virtual cube that unfolds into a tesseract, rotating in impossible ways. In the real world, you cannot see a four-dimensional object directly, but in VR, projections can be animated, shadows can be manipulated, and your senses can be guided through transformations that hint at higher dimensions. You may not see the tesseract in full, but you feel the strangeness of its geometry. For a moment, your perception is stretched, coaxed into accepting movements that defy three-dimensional logic. Beyond entertainment, these simulations serve education and research. Scientists use virtual models to explore complex molecules or to visualize datasets with hundreds of variables. Architects design spaces that can be walked through before they are built. Surgeons rehearse operations on digital bodies. In each case, VR is not a game, but a tool for navigating dimensions of information too complex for unaided senses. By translating them into immersive environments, we gain access to structures otherwise invisible. This raises questions about the nature of reality itself. If perception can be rewritten so easily, how can we be sure that the world we experience outside the headset is any more real than the one inside it? Philosophers of simulation argue that reality may itself be a kind of projection, a consistent but constructed environment generated by deeper structures. Whether or not this is true, virtual reality forces us to confront the possibility. It shows that what we take for granted, solidity, continuity, dimensionality, is always mediated by perception. The history of human culture has always involved building virtual worlds. Mythologies are virtual in the sense that they create layered realities beyond the visible. Rituals immerse participants in symbolic dimensions. Literature and art construct imaginary spaces that people inhabit through imagination. Technology has only intensified this ancient practice, making the virtual more convincing, more encompassing, more dimensional. In this sense, VR is not a break from tradition, but its continuation. It is storytelling with the full power of sensory substitution. Perhaps the most striking lesson of virtual worlds is how quickly the body adapts. After only minutes in VR, reflexes adjust to its rules. People duck from virtual projectiles, lean into virtual winds, step carefully across virtual ledges. The nervous system reacts as if the illusion were real. This adaptability shows that perception is less about truth and more about function. The brain does not demand an exact map of the universe. It demands a coherent environment in which to act. If another dimension were presented consistently enough, it would feel just as real as three-dimensional space. In this way, virtual reality becomes more than a technology. It is a metaphor for perception itself. Just as VR creates convincing worlds out of signals, so too does the brain create our experience of reality from sensory input. Both are constructions, coherent but partial, convincing but limited. The difference is that one is built by humans and the other by nature. Yet the line between them is thinner than we might think. Virtual worlds remind us that dimensions are not only out there in the cosmos, but also in here, in the architecture of perception. They can be simulated, altered, expanded. They can be rewritten by code, art, or imagination. To step into VR is to realize that our sense of reality is not fixed. It is malleable, a canvas for dimensions we have not yet fully explored. And in that realization lies a quiet, unsettling possibility. Perhaps we have never lived in three dimensions alone, but always in a reality that is itself another kind of simulation, one that we are only beginning to question. Chapter 11, the language of data and hidden dimensions. Numbers fill the modern world. They stream from satellites, sensors, markets, and machines, recording every click, every transaction, every pulse of activity. To the unaided mind, these streams are overwhelming, columns of figures that dissolve into incomprehensible haze. Yet hidden within them are patterns, connections, and shapes that stretch across dozens, sometimes hundreds of dimensions. We cannot see them directly, but with tools of mathematics and visualization, we translate them into forms the human mind can hold. In doing so, we discover that higher dimensions are not only abstract geometry, they are the daily reality of information. Think about a simple example. A photograph. On the surface, it looks two-dimensional, pixels arranged in a grid. But behind it are layers of data, color values, light intensities, depths of focus, metadata of time and place. If you treat each property as a dimension, even a single image exists in a space of many axes. A collection of images becomes a cloud in a vast multi-dimensional field, where similarity and difference are measured not by sight, but by mathematical distance. Machine learning algorithms navigate these spaces with ease, clustering images, recognizing faces, detecting patterns that no human could perceive unaided. The same is true in biology. A strand of DNA carries billions of base pairs. Each variation, each folding, each interaction with proteins represents another dimension of information. The human genome is not something we can picture in 3 axes. It lives in a dimensional space far beyond perception. Scientists reduce this complexity into maps and graphs, compressing hidden dimensions into forms we can understand. These reductions are shadows of a larger structure, projections of a reality that remains inaccessible without mathematics. Finance, too, operates in higher dimensional fields. A single investment is not only price and time, it is volatility, risk, correlation, liquidity, sentiment. Each factor adds another axis. Traders move through these invisible spaces, guided by models and equations that translate the multidimensional into charts and numbers. What appears as a simple curve on a screen is often the flattening of something much more complex. The movement of a market is the shadow of countless hidden dimensions interacting at once. Data science relies on dimensionality reduction, methods like principal component analysis or TSN that compress high-dimensional structures into 2 or 3 dimensions for visualization. These techniques are not merely conveniences. They are admissions that the world we live in cannot be grasped with ordinary senses. Information is too large, too complex, two-dimensional. To understand it, we must project it, just as a 3-dimensional object casts a 2-dimensional shadow. The maps we see are not the reality itself, but partial glimpses of higher structures. What makes this significant is that these spaces are not theoretical. They shape the technologies we use daily. Recommendation systems, deciding which film to suggest, which product to offer, which post to show, operate in high-dimensional vector spaces. Words in natural language models live in embeddings, where meaning is represented as coordinates in hundreds of dimensions. A phrase does not simply mean what it says. It has position, proximity, direction in an invisible landscape. To navigate language today is to inhabit a dimensional field that no one can picture, but that machines can traverse. The hidden dimensions of data also change how we see ourselves. Social networks map relationships, not only by direct connections, but by patterns of interaction, preferences, movements. Each of us becomes a point in a multidimensional graph, defined not by where we stand in physical space, but by how we relate in informational space. Our identities stretch into dimensions of data that we never directly perceive, but that shape how others see us, what opportunities reach us, what narratives surround us. In this sense, we already live in higher dimensions, constructed not by physics, but by information. Art responds to this in its own way. Digital artists use algorithms to generate forms that could never be imagined by hand, visualizations of data that shimmer like otherworldly landscapes. Musicians compose pieces using patterns extracted from climate data, stock fluctuations, or brainwaves. These are not arbitrary choices. They are attempts to turn hidden dimensions into audible and visible experience. In them, we catch glimpses of realities that exceed ordinary sense. Philosophically, this raises a question. If we cannot perceive these dimensions directly, are they any less real? The answer seems clear. The effects of hidden dimensions are everywhere. Diseases are diagnosed by patterns invisible without statistical models. Economies rise and fall through interactions too complex for any single perspective. Language itself is mapped in ways that no one mind can fully comprehend. The fact that we require tools to see them does not diminish their existence. It confirms it. Reality is richer than we can sense, and the unseen dimensions of data are part of that richness. To live in the modern world is to live among these invisible dimensions. We trust algorithms to navigate them, but we also experience their effects. The ad that seems to know us too well, the music suggestion that feels uncanny, the financial model that predicts a crisis. Each is the shadow of a multidimensional structure touching our lives. The challenge is to remember that what we see is always a projection, always incomplete. The maps and graphs we hold are two-dimensional windows into spaces that extend far beyond imagination. In this way, the language of data teaches the same lesson as the study of geometry or the experience of dreams. What appears flat may be layered. What seems simple may be dimensional. What feels complete may only be a shadow. Hidden dimensions are not distant curiosities of physics. They are present in every digital trace, every biological system, every structure of meaning we construct. To acknowledge them is to accept that our senses are narrow, our perceptions partial, our tools necessary. The fourth dimension, then, is not only about time or space. It is about awareness of the unseen structures shaping experience. Data is one of the clearest mirrors of this truth. It shows that reality has more axes than we can hold in mind, and that to live in the present is always to be surrounded by invisible dimensions, humming quietly beneath the surface of things. Chapter 12. The body wired for more. The human body is usually described as an object in three-dimensional space: height, width, depth, wrapped in skin, and bounded by physical limits. Yet beneath that simple outline lies a system already tuned to dimensions we do not consciously perceive. Our eyes detect only a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, but our cells respond to ultraviolet and infrared. Our ears register a sliver of vibrations, while elephants feel seismic rumbles through the ground and bats sense echoes bouncing at frequencies we cannot imagine. Even within our own species, perception varies. Some people can distinguish millions more colors because of an extra type of photoreceptor. Others feel pressure changes or magnetic orientation with unusual sensitivity. The body, far from being fixed, carries the potential to expand perception into new dimensions. Evolution limited our senses for survival, not completeness. We see enough to avoid predators and find food, hear enough to communicate, touch enough to navigate. But the universe offers far more than those fragments. Consider magnetic fields. Migratory birds navigate across continents by sensing them. Some studies suggest that humans too may carry traces of this ability, tiny magnetic particles in our cells that respond to Earth's field, though the signal rarely reaches awareness. If this perception were amplified, we might feel orientation the way we feel balance, an added axis in our embodied map of space. Other creatures reveal possibilities our bodies never fully developed. Sharks sense electric fields through organs called ampullae of Lorenzini, detecting the faint signals of muscles moving underwater. These see ultraviolet patterns on flowers, guiding them to nectar. Pit vipers detect infrared heat, perceiving prey in darkness. Each of these senses represents not just an addition, but a dimensional expansion. The world of a bee or a shark is not the same as ours. It is richer, layered with channels of information we cannot access. To imagine living with those senses is to imagine inhabiting dimensions that surround us already, invisible only because we lack the wiring. Technology is beginning to bridge that gap. Devices can give the blind outlines of sight through implants that stimulate the retina or brain. Glaives can translate sound into vibrations across the skin, allowing the deaf to perceive rhythm and speech through touch. Experimental belts vibrate gently in the direction of north, training wearers to feel orientation constantly, as though they had grown a new sense. At first, the input is overwhelming, but with time, the brain adapts. The signal fades into the background until it becomes second nature. This shows that perception is not fixed, but plastic. The nervous system incorporates new dimensions if given consistent information. What would it mean if we extended this further? Imagine a sense for radiation, allowing you to feel the silent rays from the sun or from electronic devices. Imagine perceiving the curvature of space-time itself, sensing gravity not as weight, but as subtle gradients in direction. Imagine awareness of quantum fluctuations, particles flickering in and out of existence at scales smaller than atoms. These possibilities may sound fantastic, but they are no less plausible than sight or hearing once were. They require only the right receptors and the right integration into the brain. Even without new tools, the body already hints at dimensions beyond 3 for proprioception. The sense of where your limbs are without looking is a kind of internal dimension, a map folded inside the mind. Balance, maintained by the inner ear, gives orientation relative to gravity. Pain extends awareness across time, reminding you of injuries long after the event. Hunger and thirst are senses of absence, pointing to future needs not yet met. These are not spatial axes, but experiential ones. They show that the body perceives more than surfaces. It perceives continuities, absences, potentials. Philosophy often treats the body as a boundary, the skin as the edge of the self. But the truth is that the body is porous, exchanging signals constantly. Every breath carries molecules from the world into the bloodstream. Every meal incorporates atoms that become part of tissues. Every touch is a meeting, a brief folding of one body's space into another's. If we consider these exchanges as dimensions, then the body is not closed at all. It is an intersection of countless invisible axes. Your heartbeat responds to oxygen levels, to emotional states, to the presence of others. Your immune system maps foreign invaders, creating a dimension of identity that is constantly negotiated. These processes are not visible, yet they define who you are. Cultural traditions have long intuited this. Practices of meditation, yoga, and ritual often speak of energies, flows, or fields surrounding the body. While the language differs from scientific description, the idea is the same. Human experience is not confined to 3 dimensions. The body is embedded in larger structures, felt through breath, rhythm, and sensation. These practices cultivate awareness of dimensions usually ignored, showing that perception can be trained as well as wired. The future may hold even more dramatic expansions. Brain-computer interfaces are already in development, promising to merge human consciousness with streams of digital data. Imagine perceiving stock markets not as numbers but as shifting patterns in a sensory field, or feeling the health of ecosystems as vibrations across the skin. These additions would not simply be tools, they would become lived dimensions, altering the structure of selfhood itself. Just as language reshaped human thought, new senses may reshape human being. In this way, the body is both limited and limitless. It restricts perception to narrow bands, yet it also demonstrates extraordinary adaptability. Each sense you take for granted, sight, hearing, touch, was once an evolutionary innovation. There is no reason to believe that innovation must end. To be human is to reach, to invent, to extend. The body is not a cage, but a platform for expansion, always capable of wiring itself into new dimensions of reality. The 4th dimension, then, is not only time, it is the possibility of perceiving more than what we were given. It is the recognition that the body, fragile and finite as it may seem, is an unfinished project. Every tool we build, every practice we develop, every experiment we attempt is a step toward that expansion. We already live surrounded by unseen dimensions. The question is not whether they exist, but how long before we learn to feel them, and in doing so, become something more than we are now. Chapter 13. Communities in hidden space. Dimensions are not only about geometry, they are not only about the hidden folds of space-time, or the strange possibilities of physics. They also live in the ways people relate to one another. Communities are dimensional structures, webs of belonging that cannot be seen directly, but that shape the lives of everyone within them. They are not made of walls, but of memory. They are not measured in meters, but in meaning. And in this sense, they are as much a proof of hidden dimensions as any tesseract or equation. To begin with something simple, a friendship. You sit across from someone at a table. You share words, laughter, silences. On the surface, it looks like two people in space, but the friendship is not in that single meeting. It is in everything that has led to it. The old conversations, the shared struggles, the moments remembered and retold. And it is in what extends forward, the plans you make, the trust you carry, the sense that tomorrow the bond will remain. A friendship is not contained in the present moment. It stretches across time, across many places. It is dimensional. You cannot see it all at once, but you feel its continuity. Scale this outward, and you see the same pattern. Families, neighborhoods, nations. None of them exist purely in physical space. They exist in layers of story, ritual, and connection. A neighborhood is not only houses aligned on streets. It is the invisible web of greetings, shared histories, disputes, and celebrations. A nation is not only borders on a map, but a set of myths carried in memory, passed down in language and symbol, binding strangers who will never meet. These communities exist in another dimension, one that is real but intangible, built not of matter but of meaning. Sociologists try to map this with networks, nodes for people, edges for connections. The maps look flat on paper, but what they represent is higher dimensional. Each relationship is an axis, each bond another coordinate. A person does not exist in a single point, but at the intersection of many ties: family, friends, colleagues, beliefs, histories. Your identity is stretched across all of them, suspended in an invisible space. You are not simply here, in this room, in this body. You are also there, in the memories of others, in the promises you have made, in the roles you inhabit. You are dimensional. The digital age has made this structure clearer. Online, people form communities without ever sharing physical space. Across continents, strangers find one another in forums, games, discussions, and movements. They share ideas, create bonds, and sometimes change the course of events. The dimension that holds them is not geography, but affinity. You may sit alone in your room, yet you are not alone. You are surrounded by presences woven into a hidden network. The screen does not show you the whole of it, but you live inside it nonetheless, caught in threads that stretch far beyond what you can see. These hidden dimensions have always been powerful. History is shaped by them. Social movements often begin in places invisible to rulers. Whispered stories, underground gatherings, secret letters, shared songs. Slowly, these threads weave together until they form a fabric strong enough to challenge armies and governments. What begins as invisible connections becomes visible change. Communities bend the arc of history, not because of their physical size, but because of the unseen bonds that hold them together. But communities are not only liberating, they also constrain. Every belonging carries expectations, traditions, unspoken rules. A person may feel the weight of family, culture, or nation pressing down, limiting choices, defining identity in ways not chosen. These hidden dimensions act like fields, pulling individuals into patterns. Sometimes they nurture, sometimes they trap, but always they shape. To live in society is to move inside these invisible structures, to feel their gravity even when you cannot see the lines. Technology has intensified this. Algorithms now map our connections, amplifying some ties, weakening others. They decide what you see, who you interact with, which ideas reach you. In doing so, they redraw the hidden dimensions of community. The feeds you scroll through are not neutral. They are compressed projections of vast, invisible networks. Behind every post lies a structure of relations and influences you cannot see but that shape your perception. The digital realm shows that the dimensions of community are not only natural but engineered, designed, manipulated. To see communities as dimensions is to understand that human beings never live in three-dimensional space alone. We are always already extended into invisible webs. We are born into families, languages, and traditions that stretch behind us. We move through networks of work and friendship that shape our choices. We dream within collective stories of nation, culture, or cause. Each of these adds an axis, another coordinate to the space of identity. You are not a point. You are a multi-dimensional being, defined as much by invisible ties as by physical presence. Art has long captured this truth. A choir is not just voices in a room. It is a dimension of harmony created between them. A dance is not just movement. It is the collective rhythm that arises when bodies move together. A novel is not just words. It is a community of meaning between author and reader, stretched across time. Even silence shared between people is dimensional, a space of understanding invisible to the eye but deeply felt. Philosophy, too, has gestured toward this. Thinkers have described the social fabric, the invisible threads binding people together. They have spoken of the imagined communities that nations create, where millions feel connection without ever meeting. These are ways of acknowledging the same thing, that belonging is dimensional, that society is built not only of bodies and buildings, but of invisible bonds that defy geometry. The fourth dimension, then, is not only about time or higher space, or the strange possibilities of physics. It is also about community. It is the recognition that what holds us is not just matter, but meaning. It is the acknowledgement that to be human is to exist in hidden spaces of belonging, to be stretched across networks of memory, trust, and imagination. What you see in front of you, the crowd in a street, the group in a room, is only the shadow. The real community is larger, invisible, woven into dimensions of history and hope. You inhabit it every day, even when you forget. And once you see it this way, you realize that your life is never lived in isolation. You are always moving inside hidden dimensions, held by bonds that cannot be seen, but that define you all the same. Chapter 14, Evolutionary. What ifs? Evolution shapes perception, like a sculptor carving from stone. Every sense you have, sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, exists because it once served survival. Eyes tuned to the visible spectrum, ears to the range of voices and rustling threats, skin to pressure and pain. These senses were not designed to give the full truth of reality, only enough to navigate and endure. Yet what if the process had carved differently? What if evolution had granted us extra senses, tuned to hidden layers of the world? Would the fourth dimension be something strange to imagine, or simply another aspect of daily life? Take magnetoreception, the ability to sense Earth's magnetic field. Birds carry it, navigating across continents with precision. Some fish, turtles, and even bacteria are guided by it. If humans had evolved with this sense, the world would never have felt flat. Every step would carry a faint pull, an orientation beyond sight or touch. We would feel directions not as abstract compass points, but as visceral forces, a constant reminder that the world is wrapped in fields invisible to the eye. Our maps would not have been lines on parchment, but living sensations, guiding us through forests, seas, and skies. The fourth dimension, as magnetic flow, would be part of us from birth. Consider echolocation. Bats and dolphins map the world by sending out sounds and reading their echoes. They perceive distances, textures, and movement in darkness, inhabiting a space that for us is blind. Imagine if humans had developed this capacity. Cities at night would not be dark, but alive with structure, as every building and body reflected signals. Silence would no longer be absence, but information-rich space. Walls, corners, and moving figures would ripple in perception without need for light. Our idea of space itself would be different, less visual, more vibrational, layered with echoes of the unseen. Ultraviolet vision offers another path. Bees see flowers patterned with ultraviolet markings invisible to us, guides etched into petals to direct them to nectar. If humans could see this spectrum, the world would shimmer with designs we cannot imagine. The sky itself would be different, the atmosphere filtering patterns beyond our current reach. Everyday objects would reveal hidden textures. What we call plain would burst with detail. Entire symbolic systems might have evolved around these perceptions. Art built on palettes we cannot picture. Spirituality shaped by visions invisible to most animals. Infrared would add yet another dimension. Some snakes perceive heat as a visible layer, detecting warm-blooded prey in darkness. If we shared this sense, every moment would carry thermal halos. A room would glow with the warmth of bodies, machines, and fires. Emotions might even become visible, as blushing, fever, or fear registered in heat signatures. Privacy itself would be redefined. What we hide in the face might still reveal itself in infrared glow. A dimension of truth would always surround us, whether we wanted it or not. Even subtler senses could have changed the way we live. Sharks detect faint electrical fields through organs near their snouts. If humans carried this ability, we might feel the hum of power lines, the presence of hidden currents under the earth. We would walk not only through space, but through networks of energy, aware of every flicker and surge. Technology would not have surprised us. It would have been visible from the start, the natural extension of what we already felt. If any of these senses had been ours, higher dimensional awareness might not be philosophy, but instinct. We would grow up inside worlds richer in axes than sight and touch alone. Perhaps the very concept of dimensions would be different, defined by lived perception rather than abstract mathematics. Children would speak of directions invisible to us now, just as casually as they speak of up and down. The unseen would not be mysterious. It would be everyday experience. This raises a deeper question. How much of reality lies outside our current range? If survival never required it, evolution never gave it, but absence of perception does not mean absence of existence. Just as ultraviolet patterns guide bees and magnetic fields guide birds, there may be dimensions shaping us now that we cannot feel. We walk through them blind, unaware of the hidden forces that press against us. What we call mystery may simply be sensory limitation. Technology now offers glimpses of what evolution withheld. Night vision goggles show infrared, compasses reveal magnetic flow, Geiger counters detect radiation, and telescopes extend sight into wavelengths our eyes cannot touch. These are prosthetics of perception, artificial senses bolted onto our bodies. They remind us that our natural view is partial, and that dimensions lie all around us, awaiting translation. With implants and interfaces, we may yet add them permanently. A person could one day feel north in their bones, see radiation as a glow, or hear data as tones. If so, human evolution will not end with biology, but continue through invention, extending perception into dimensions that were once the territory of imagination. Philosophically, this possibility unsettles the boundary of what it means to be human. If new senses change the way we perceive space, time, and relation, they will also change identity. A person who feels magnetic fields will not navigate the world the same way as one who does not. A society that sees ultraviolet will not paint, dress, or worship the way ours does. Each added axis creates a different version of humanity, a different reality. Perhaps somewhere in the universe, other beings already live with senses we cannot conceive, inhabiting dimensions that to them are as ordinary as sight and sound are to us. The thought experiment reveals something profound. The fourth dimension may not be a remote mystery of physics. It may be as close as the senses we do not have. It may already surround us, unnoticed, woven into the world, waiting only for perception to catch up. Evolution gave us one slice of reality, narrow but sufficient. Technology may give us more, and each time perception expands, so too does our world, unfolding dimensions that were always there, invisible but essential. To ask what if is not only speculation, it is a reminder of humility. We live inside limits, shaped by chance. Our eyes, ears, and skin do not capture truth in full. They capture what was useful. If reality is larger than survival required, then most of it remains hidden. The fourth dimension, in this sense, is not something to discover far away. It is what we have been blind to all along, waiting for the day we finally learn to feel it. Chapter 15, Consciousness as a Higher Dimension. When scientists speak of dimensions, they usually mean coordinates that describe space and time. When philosophers speak of consciousness, they mean the inner field where thoughts, feelings, and awareness arise. These seem like separate domains, physics on one side, the mind on the other. Yet perhaps consciousness itself is dimensional, not just an emergent property of neurons, but a structure layered above the physical. To consider this is to ask whether the inner world we each experience is not simply contained in three-dimensional brains, but stretched across hidden axes that give rise to awareness. Start with the simplest fact. The brain is a physical object. It weighs little more than a kilogram, composed of cells, chemicals, and electrical signals. Yet inside that structure exists the experience of color, music, memory, and self. Red is not only wavelengths of light, it is a sensation. Music is not only vibrations of air, it is meaning. The self is not only neurons firing, it is the felt continuity of being. These experiences are not visible in brain scans. They are projections into another kind of space, the inner dimension of consciousness. Every thought you have is not just a point. It has direction, depth, association. You can imagine the past, anticipate the future, create worlds that do not exist. Within the mind, dimensions open endlessly. A single memory links to countless others. A single emotion floods the body with sensations. A single word conjures layers of meaning. Consciousness feels like a higher dimensional structure collapsing into linear speech and action. We live in a vast inner landscape, yet what we express outward is only the shadow. Dreams offer evidence of this. In sleep, consciousness detaches from the constraints of waking space and time. It rearranges moments, merging past and future, blurring inside and outside. A single dream can carry decades of narrative in minutes, places folding into one another, identities shifting without confusion. The dreaming mind accepts these distortions because it is not bound to ordinary dimensions. It reveals that consciousness has its own axes, flexible and layered, capable of weaving experiences beyond the geometry of waking life. Meditation provides another perspective. Practitioners report states where the boundaries of self dissolve, where thoughts quiet and awareness expands into vastness. Time feels slower or absent. The sense of space shifts. The self no longer appears as a fixed point. Neuroscience shows changes in brain activity during these states, but the lived experience is dimensional, a perception of consciousness as an infinite field rather than a narrow stream. Such experiences suggest that awareness is not only constructed, it is layered, capable of moving through spaces that have no physical coordinates. Altered states, whether through ritual, fasting, or psychedelics, reinforce this idea. People describe visions of infinite grids, tunnels of light, unity of opposites, encounters with presences beyond explanation. The consistency of these reports across cultures and times suggests that consciousness, when unbound from ordinary filters, reveals structures that feel higher dimensional. Whether these are projections of the brain or glimpses of something larger remains uncertain, but their reality to the experiencer cannot be denied. They show that awareness is not confined to ordinary perception, but can expand into spaces that exceed it. Even ordinary thought carries hints of dimensionality. Consider language. Every sentence you speak collapses complex networks of meaning into linear strings. Behind each word lies a web of associations, histories, and images. The mind navigates these webs effortlessly, moving through semantic dimensions that machines now attempt to model. To think is to move across axes invisible to the senses, but real within consciousness. When you recall a memory or imagine a possibility, you are not bound by physical coordinates. You travel through the dimensional space of mind. This raises a radical possibility. What if consciousness itself is a dimension? Just as length, width, and height describe space and time describes change, perhaps awareness describes the lived interior of reality. Without it, the universe would still exist, but it would not be experienced. Consciousness might be the axis along which meaning appears, the dimension where matter becomes mind. If so, then every being with awareness participates in this dimension, not creating it but inhabiting it, just as physical objects inhabit space. Philosophers have long circled this idea. Descartes spoke of the mind as separate from matter, while others argued that mind and body are one. Contemporary theories like panpsychism suggest that consciousness may be fundamental, woven into matter itself. Integrated information theory proposes that awareness arises from the complexity of connections, measured as a kind of dimensional richness. These views differ, but they all hint at the same intuition. Consciousness is not reducible to physical parts alone. It requires another level of description, another axis of being. If consciousness is dimensional, then its qualities resemble those of higher spaces. It cannot be seen directly, but its projections shape everything. Just as a shadow reveals the outline of an unseen object, behavior and speech reveal the presence of awareness. Just as a tesseract casts strange shapes in three-dimensional space, consciousness casts thoughts, dreams, and choices into the world. We never see it in full, but we live inside its shadows. This perspective also reframes the question of identity. You are not only a body in space or a point on a timeline. You are also a consciousness spread across experiences. Every memory, every anticipation, every sensation is part of your dimensional shape. What you call self is a projection of a larger form, one that cannot be fully captured in any single moment. Consciousness is not static. It unfolds, branches, and layers, as dimensional as the cosmos itself. To see consciousness as a dimension is not to reduce it to numbers or equations, but to recognize its structure. It extends beyond surfaces, binding together time, memory, and perception into a coherent whole. Without it, the universe might be, but it would not appear. With it, existence is illuminated from within. In this sense, the higher dimension we seek may not be in distant galaxies or abstract mathematics. It may be here, in the field of awareness itself, the hidden axis through which reality becomes known. The fourth dimension, then, is not only time or space, it is also consciousness. It is the inner depth that turns matter into meaning, sensation into experience, self into story. To explore it is not only a scientific task, but a human one, lived in every thought, dream, and moment of awareness. Perhaps the greatest hidden dimension has been with us all along, the dimension of mind. Chapter 16, the horizon of the unseen. Every exploration of dimensions ends at the same place, the recognition that what we perceive is only a fragment. Three dimensions of space give us form. Time gives us continuity. But beyond these lies a horizon we cannot cross with sight or touch. The fourth dimension has been described as geometry, as memory, as community, as consciousness. Each perspective is a shadow of something larger, a reminder that the world is always more than it appears. Think about how often this truth has surfaced in human history. When Galileo first looked through his telescope, he saw moons orbiting Jupiter. The universe suddenly grew. When microscopes revealed cells, a hidden world of life appeared in every drop of water. When physics uncovered radio waves, the air became alive with signals we had never noticed. Each discovery was not the creation of something new, but the unveiling of what was already there. The dimensions of reality did not change. Our perception did. The same may be true for higher dimensions still. We imagine them as speculative, abstract, unreachable, but perhaps they are as close as radio waves once were, as real as microbes before the lens. We walk through them daily, blind but immersed, waiting for tools, concepts, or shifts in consciousness to reveal them. Just as evolution gave us eyes for light and ears for sound, we may one day develop or invent new senses that allow us to feel the hidden axes of reality. The horizon is not empty. It is full, only hidden. The mind itself hints at this. Dreams blur space and time. Synesthesia blends senses. Meditation opens vast fields of awareness. These experiences show that perception can already stretch beyond ordinary limits. Technology extends this further, with virtual realities that create convincing new spaces and instruments that map invisible spectra. Each step is the same, expanding the slice of reality we can inhabit. The dimensions we seek are not only out there waiting to be entered, they are in here, in the capacities of the body and the mind, waiting to be awakened. The implications are profound. If perception is always partial, then truth is always larger. What we call reality is not false, but it is incomplete. Every culture, every science, every philosophy has grasped a piece, projected it, and named it heaven. The astral plane, the realm of forms, space-time, consciousness. All of these are ways of pointing toward dimensions beyond the obvious. None are final, but all are gestures toward the horizon of the unseen. This horizon is not only scientific or philosophical, it is also personal. Each of us carries hidden dimensions within memories no one else can access, hopes that shape our choices, inner experiences that never leave our minds. To live is to inhabit spaces invisible to others, yet real to ourselves. Our relationships are bridges across these hidden dimensions. Our communities are fabrics woven from them, and our consciousness is the field where they unfold. The fourth dimension is not distant. It is lived every day, and still, we are restless. We reach outward, building telescopes, equations, and philosophies, trying to grasp more. We reach inward, cultivating awareness, exploring altered states, seeking glimpses of what lies beyond the ordinary. The search itself is evidence of dimensionality. We feel incomplete with only what we can see. We sense that there is more, and we are drawn to it, even without certainty. The horizon calls, not because we know what lies beyond, but because we cannot believe that this is all there is. Perhaps the greatest lesson is humility. Our senses show us a fraction. Our tools extend us further, but never to completion. The universe is layered beyond measure, and consciousness is woven into those layers in ways we do not yet understand. To acknowledge this is not defeat, it is wonder. It means that mystery is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of depth. Every shadow, every whisper of another dimension is a reminder that reality is always richer than the frame we place around it. The fourth dimension, then, is not only a question for mathematics or science, it is a way of seeing. It is the willingness to recognize that what is visible is only the surface, and that beneath and beyond lies a vastness we have only begun to glimpse. It is an attitude of exploration, of humility, of awe. Whether in physics, in community, in memory, or in consciousness, the horizon of the unseen invites us to continue reaching. We may never hold the whole of it, but we do not need to. It is enough to know that we live inside something larger, to sense that every moment is the shadow of a greater shape, every life a thread in a vast dimensional fabric. The horizon is not the end. It is the beginning of seeing ourselves as more than three-dimensional creatures. It is the reminder that to be human is to dwell always in hidden space, guided by glimpses of a reality that is endlessly deeper, endlessly wider, endlessly more dimensional than we can yet imagine.